What the
What the heck is
happening?
What the heck is happening?
Hello, everybody, at the next episode of the Trending Topics podcast. UNICEF NextGen is a community of young philanthropists between the ages of 21 and 45 who use their skills, expertise, time, networks, and financial resources to help children. Now, UNICEF NextGen launches in Austria and wants to ensure that exciting projects for children can be financed here as well. And to talk about that, I welcome Kelly Wilson, chair of UNICEF NextGen Los Angeles and national board member of UNICEF USA, to the podcast. Hi, Kelly.
Hi, Jakob. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here today. So basically, UNICEF's role is to advocate for the protection of children's rights. So everybody knows that. And you also have been director of social impact at Warner Media. You have many years of experience in the media business. Why are you involved with UNICEF?
It's a great question, and it's always been one that's been quite easy for me to answer. So, as you mentioned, I work in social impact at big corporations. And so part of my job is to vet nonprofits, who is doing great work, who can do efficient work at scale. And for me, my personal cause is children, and how do we help the most children in the best way globally? And so I came to UNICEF very easily. The organization has saved more lives than any other children's organization in the world. And it also works in 190 countries and territories every day, 24/7, not just in emergencies. And so their ability to be effective and impactful for children and save children is at such a scale that can't be replicated with any other organization.
Okay. Now, let's talk specifically about UNICEF NextGen. I think not everybody knows it very well. So how do you describe it? What are the goals you want to achieve with NextGen?
Yeah, UNICEF NextGen is really a layer within the larger UNICEF organization, and the focus is on engaging young philanthropists. I think every generation is different from the next, and what we're seeing is that also relates to how people want to give. And so you have different generations wanting to engage their communities and give and be active in philanthropy in different ways. And so NextGen was UNICEF's way of addressing that. How do we look at engaging people from 20 to 45 or who are young at heart in a different way than maybe we've done in the past? It looks like specifically a lot more community building. It looks like more education and advocacy at the local level. So that will be like here in Austria, and I'm here in Vienna today. So last night in Vienna, we had an incredible event learning actually about specific issues facing the world's children and also specific projects that UNICEF is bringing to market. So that education piece is something that's quite new in the philanthropic space in terms of the informed donor.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So, and UNICEF NextGen now launched in Austria. It's also in the United States, UK, Vietnam, Italy, and Germany. And now it comes to Austria, which is great. What would you say? Why is it coming to Austria now? Of all the countries on this planet, could be also another country.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the goal is that NextGen ends up being everywhere, but specifically to your question of why Austria, it's really because young people in the market asked for it. The incredible thing is that NextGen is built in collaboration with young people in the community and also the UNICEF staff. And so young philanthropists in Austria have been asking for a way to engage with UNICEF. And also UNICEF is hoping to engage younger philanthropists in their cause to make sure that the next generation is aware of UNICEF's work and also aware of the issues facing children globally. Last night at the launch event, there were over 100 people, which was quite incredible. I think that shows to the philanthropic spirit here in Austria and also just people's interest and curiosity in learning more about what's happening globally. And there was a real hunger for folks to connect on these issues and actually meet like-minded people. The curious thing, I think, with this sort of generational change in how you give is there's this philosophy, I don't know if it's an official term, but we sort of call it that people now want to give in a polycapital way. So not only do they want to give their financial resources, but they also would like to give their networks, their time, their thought leadership as well. And so UNICEF NextGen here is trying to bring together all of those different components of leadership to the philanthropic space on behalf of UNICEF.
When you look at this crowd of more than 100 people that gathered together in Vienna, what do you think? What do these people have in common? So why do they want to engage with UNICEF NextGen?
It's kind of amazing. So I'm based in the US, and it's very exciting for me to see NextGen grow globally, because that's the idea, that it's this global network. And I love your question, because often I'm asked what's different about each market. But actually what I see is what is quite similar, in that everybody that comes to the table to get involved with UNICEF NextGen is really dynamic person and really engaged in their life. That can look like a lot of different things. Maybe they have a growing family and they're trying to be the all-star in their career, or they're starting their own impact investing fund. So really dynamic people that seem to be just quite curious about life and about the world. I would say the backgrounds are entirely different, though. There are several people who had worked in the nonprofit space, a lot of folks in finance, some lawyers. I think, some people in media and marketing, and all of those different lenses actually bring together quite an interesting and refreshing palette of people, all talking about the same issue, which is how do we help the world's children?
And how do these people get involved with UNICEF NextGen? So there's now the organization also in Austria. What do they have to bring to the table? So I guess it's time, resources, and hopefully money, so donations.
All of it. I mean, it is absolutely what you make of it. The goal is that everybody, like I said, is dynamic and layered. And so in terms of what that means on time, that's going to vary to each person. But specifically in Austria, you can get in touch with the UNICEF NextGen team, who is very eager now that the program has launched to recruit additional members. And that looks like a time commitment. And what that time commitment means in the first year is helping to actually co-create and build what NextGen Austria can look like, which is quite a cool way to be involved, to have your imprint and impression on what a program could look like, 5 or 10 years down the line. There's a financial commitment as well that varies depending on the market. And so the UNICEF team here in Austria can speak to each individual about that. And then, of course, there's just a commitment to wanting to do what you can for the world's children, and for being mission driven in terms of your work with the organization.
How is the Austrian organization connected to the other markets? So is there a lot of back and forth about ideas, common projects?
Yeah, so there's two ways. There's the UNICEF connection, the larger UNICEF connection, which every country office is tapped into. What is UNICEF doing globally? What are the needs of children globally, and then even specifically in each market? So each country office that's delivering programs shares that information back with country offices like Austria, who is raising funds and awareness for these issues. The other network that is very exciting to me is the NextGen network, which is very active. For example, there is a NextGen global team. Founder Casey Rotter runs that team, and she helps actually co-create UNICEF NextGen launches with each country office where there's a market for this. And so she's been co-creating this launch with Austria for the last year. But then also there's a global summit every year for NextGen leadership. And so this last year was in Copenhagen at UNICEF's Supply Division, which is the world's largest humanitarian warehouse. It's quite cool. It looks like a fully automated Amazon facility, but just for life-saving supplies for children. So we had a global summit there, which had members from the US, UK, Italy, Vietnam, Germany. And then next year, we hope to see our Austrian NextGen leadership there as well. And it's a great time to build actually NextGen strategy together globally, because as you know, my generation, but every generation after me too, is we're a global community. People are crossing borders all of the time. People have parents from multiple countries. And even just the ease of travel in many ways has created this sort of global network of community and friends that I think NextGen has really tapped into, just an understanding of that and a natural awareness of that. So strategy is built as one team together.
Okay. So UNICEF NextGen, as I understand, is also about funding meaningful projects that benefit children. What criteria do these projects have to meet, and how are projects basically chosen to be financed?
So, as you can imagine, there are sort of infinite projects happening around the world for children within the UNICEF ecosystem. And several are very well funded, and others need additional funding, either because they're new or they're underreported, or the needs are not as known publicly. And so, in terms of the criteria for NextGen, it's what projects would be appealing to this group of donors in this generation, and then also, are the projects ready to be brought to market? So, are they at a place where they actually can be implemented? And do they have the specific funding requirements and needs in place? How the programs actually come in, though, the projects is quite cool. So UNICEF country offices around the world that are delivering life-saving programs to children submit proposals for projects that they need funded. And that can be a whole range of projects, from infrastructure projects. I'll mention one of them that Austria is considering, which is solar-powered water pumps in communities in Malawi, which has a climate focus, it has a tech focus, but also it's an infrastructure focus, right? This is like a water and sanitation program, providing water to communities, which is life-saving. And so it can range anywhere from that to really incredible tech projects like the drone corridor in Malawi, which is this state-of-the-art drone testing corridor run by UNICEF, which uses drones to not only capture imaging of remote communities to follow weather and disease patterns, but also they're piloting the use of drones to deliver life-saving supplies and materials to remote locations who don't have infrastructure, road access, among many other things. So the projects vary, but they're proposed by UNICEF offices themselves that are delivering them. They have a fundraising goal against them. And then how they're selected is leadership, next-gen leadership in that community. So in this case, Austria, leadership members, so folks join, they will have the opportunity to actually vote on which project they want to fund, which is an incredible thing because you get really close. You can also get to know the program team actually delivering it. And you see and are reported back on the direct results of your funding, which is quite a unique thing that UNICEF can offer its next-gen donors.
Okay. It seems to me that these projects do have a lot of tech components. So there's an app, there's solar power, there are drones. Is this like the red line of next-gen projects? So are they all tech-based?
They aren't all tech-based, but what I will say is that UNICEF is quite a tenured organization, and I don't think it's as publicly known of how innovative it is. And actually, there's an innovation team that sits within the organization. And so to have that within this sort of multi-decade old organization that's working in 190 countries is actually quite totally rare and very, very cool. And so I think NextGen is more drawn to those projects. They also, from the tech standpoint, are more future thinking. A lot of times they're looking at long-term solutions, future solutions, and they have a positive lens of looking at humanitarian aid in a world that feels very overwhelming with tragic news. And so I think sometimes the tech angle provides this really positive outlook on solution building when sometimes things can feel quite overwhelming. So it is not a hard line, but it's definitely an area that I think the next-gen community is quite drawn to.
Okay. And how are these projects financed? So is it purely through donations? And how much money do these projects need at least? I mean, it sounds like big projects that might need millions of euros.
Exactly. So projects need anywhere from $100,000 to millions of dollars, depending on the scale of the project. NextGen isn't the only source of funding for these projects. And so oftentimes NextGen will make a minimum commitment that is meaningful enough to make impact within the project, but it's a large ecosystem of partners, as well as contributions from UNICEF, from other global donors as well, that are putting into the pot to fund specific projects. Or, for example, there's a growing trend in trust-based philanthropy, which is quite important, which is allowing the organization to make decisions on where its funding will go. So, for example, I personally give in an unrestricted way so that UNICEF can the money is most flexible, can be put wherever it's needed most. But some people are contributing specifically to countries because they want to focus on contributing to Malawi, or they want to focus on contributing specifically to Bolivia. And so each of these projects is receiving funding in different ways from donors across the world.
Okay, yeah. Is it also possible for commercial projects to apply, or is it just for non-commercial projects?
Yeah, so UNICEF actually is incredible at global partnerships. And so oftentimes, too, they're investing in social ventures. Um, how it would work is those projects are really co-created on the ground in the office where the program is being delivered. And then the UNICEF team is the team that will make us aware of programs that then need additional funding. So it's a little bit different than if a startup wanted to apply directly for funding from NextGen. It would have to go through the UNICEF ecosystem, but there's a lot of co-creation with social venture partners because they're doing incredible impact too. And the more companies that exist that have social venture mindset and that social impact in nature, I mean, the more impact you can make for children. And UNICEF is working with governments and corporations in every country that it works in. And so it's quite natural for that alignment to take place too on programs.
Okay. And UNICEF NextGen is operating in a bunch of other countries. What are the most outstanding projects that come to your mind? Is there anything we might have already heard about?
I mean, I think there's sort of incredible things that we have done globally that we have a lot of pride in. I can think of one project that really stood out to me just because at the time that it was happening, but basically it was creating job opportunities for Syrian refugee women in Jordan, and basically empowering these women to be community leaders within the refugee community and giving them job opportunities within that community so that they could start to earn a living. The thing that was really interesting to me about it was the timeliness of us being delivered that project that needed funding. This was several years ago, but it was sort of at the height of that migrant crisis because of the crisis happening in Syria. And it was kind of the power of NextGen for us to receive this information that a program like this needed funding, and us to say yes and then commit $100,000 to fundraising over the next, I think we ended up doing it in 6 to 8 months that year. And so I think for me, it's right. We heard from the head of the program office there directly, which is sort of this incredible access, said yes. And then within a year, the funding was able to be delivered. The other project that that NextGen is quite involved with, that UNICEF is leading, which is incredible, is the Giga Project. Have you heard of this?
Not yet, no.
Okay, so the Giga Project is a global initiative to bring all schools online. Full stop, just all schools everywhere. And UNICEF, because of its how integrated it is into these 190 communities, and because of its direct work with children, is leading the charge along with other partners, but leading the charge on bringing all schools online, which is just like the coolest thing. And the fact that that's a goal, and the fact that it isn't just a broad goal, it's actually a program that's making progress and like direct progress towards reaching 100% participation. So it's very, very cool. And NextGen is very excited to be involved in that and to support the UNICEF innovation team that's leading it.
Okay, very exciting. My last question is, how is the situation of children from a global perspective evolving? Of course, every day we hear horror stories from Ukraine, from Gaza Strip, from many other places. But in general, is there improvement that's also measurable?
Yeah, and I think, someone on the UNICEF team could answer this best, but a term I heard the other day, which is children are facing a polycrisis reality. And so the number of crises that children are facing, not only in their lifetime, but in their childhood, is just significantly more and significantly more frequent. And those are crises of every kind, human-made, environmentally, and climate disasters. And so, with the internet and the digitization of the world, children's access to the information about crises that other children are facing and other folks are facing too has exponentially grown. And so that is quite concerning. I think it only makes us dig in more and saying we can't get complacent with trying to have a child-focused lens and take care of the world's children. That being said, there's a lot of improvements in other areas too on behalf of children in terms of their access to healthcare, their ability to live longer and to not die of preventable diseases because of the work UNICEF and other organizations have done around vaccinations, around providing healthcare to remote communities and community education. So there are a lot of wins on behalf of children's ability to live longer and not die of preventable causes, particularly in the early years, is quite improving. The world that they're living in is quite complicated. And so the issues that children are facing is still growing. And I think the interesting thing that UNICEF does is it's basically looking at all of the issues of the world, but just from a child-focused lens, which is this really incredible lens to look at things, which is all of this is happening. How do we look at this in the way and that's impacting children specifically and create solutions for them with them as the central character in mind? And so that will never stop. But the organization always says it's in business to try to go out of business. UNICEF would like to not have to exist, and that's its goal, and it's investing in solutions to try to make that happen. But as you know, it's a very complicated and evolving world. And so right now there's a lot of work to be done.
Absolutely. Kelly, thanks for the interview.
Thanks so much.
So, das war die heutige Folge des Trending Topics Podcast. Wenn es euch gefallen hat, lasst uns doch 4, 5 Sterne als Bewertung da und folgt dem Podcast auf Spotify, Apple Music und Co. Für Anregungen, Kritik, Feedback oder Wünsche zu zukünftigen Gästen schickt uns jederzeit gerne eine Mail an feedback@trendingtopics.at. Weitere News zu allen Inhalten gibt es natürlich tagesaktuell auf trendingtopics.eu. Danke an dieser Stelle an Geocast für die tolle Post-Production. Euch danke fürs Zuhören. Bis bald.